What wedding moment made you think, they are not going to last long? The best man's speech was about how selfishly the groom had acted during a night out in telling him to treat marriage differently. He ended up at the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He went out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight. She left the house and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. I was maid of honor. Me. Best man and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. Bride excused herself to go to the bathroom and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking. She's passionate about. To the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together and gave him the warmest smile. Thinking he had praised her, he scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her but at her. Behind her back. They lasted 7 months. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. Bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, etc. Note I said extra. It was already decorated by the venue. She just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago she sends my groom's mom, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she bought, $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mom's side. My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students. Many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me, babe. Like the previous time you called me." Other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally frocked up 20-year-olds, or one big piece of performance art. A fun light-hearted dance with the groom followed by a close and slow dance with her male best friend. Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms and the girl next to me. The groom's ex drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. I worked at a museum that also doubled as a wedding venue in the summers. As part of the wedding package, the museum would stay open after hours for the guests only, so I'd just sit there and greet people basically. One wedding got particularly rowdy. Almost everyone was drunk. People were jumping into the fountain. Someone vomited in said fountain. At one point, the bride is crying. Turns out the groom and one of his groomsmen were screwing upstairs in one of the bathrooms. A fight ensued between the groom and the father of the bride and cops were called because it really got ugly. Entertaining for me, but I felt so bad for the bride. When the bride drank vodka out of a pint glass and spent a significant amount of time making out with another guy on the dance floor. My uncle when he broke his neck trying to breakdance on his stag do. He went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now, but because of his surgery he cannot turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's frocking insane. One of my friends got married. Afterwards she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy. She was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony. In the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They are divorced now. Edit to add. I believe it was a cousin calling to ask if they were late for the wedding. Where to start? The best man was the groom's coke dealer who dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on coke and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us every time he saw us. The bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding. Whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more and tell us, "Don't smoke weed. If she, his wife, won't let me smoke weed in the house, then you guys can't." Every time we grouped up. My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she'd summoned the photographer back shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy for me." Edit. Thought I'd add they broke up when she cheated on him. Apparently, that marriage she was desperate for was only good while it brought her attention. When they got married illegally in high school. Two 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time, across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip, and when I was leaving I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's gonna be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months, I believe. Two friends of mine got married. And when they gave their vows, the guy started laughing at the part about being faithful. Oops. When the groom ran up and punched the bride during the reception in some kind of drunken melee. When the groom went in for the kiss after their vows and the bride presented her cheek instead. They divorced less than a year later after it was discovered she had been cheating on him pretty much their entire relationship. I hope you're doing better, Isaac. My best friend's wedding is tomorrow, and I told her about how I've heard several wedding photographers, videographers say that shoving cake in the face is almost a for sure factor that they're going to divorce. She told me, "Oh yeah, I told him not to, but he probably will anyways. So we'll see how this goes." Update. She put the cake in his mouth respectfully, but he booped her nose 2 or 3 times, which wasn't huge, and they just laughed it off. I cried a couple times during this wedding because their love does seem very genuine. So sorry if this wasn't the update you were hoping for, lol, but I'll give a 1-year update. The bride and groom did the first dance, then spent the rest of their reception completely apart from each other, getting sit-faced with their own separate friend groups. The only other dancing all night was the bride dancing with her high school friends, the father-daughter dance and the mother-son dance, during which the groom was crying. The best man speech didn't mention the bride at all and basically boiled down to, "Groom, you're married now, but our bond is older and stronger. All of our hunting and fishing trips together are the best thing in our lives. Can't wait for more." Such a sad, desperate atmosphere. They made it a little over 1 year. Groom got into a fist fight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context: groom and bride's dad. Actually, most people in these families, if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though. The most beautiful wedding I've been to ended in divorce. Venue was where the groom's father is buried, and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months, and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. He complained she was mean to him throughout their dating life. The day before the wedding, all of the groomsmen and the groom's friends told him not to marry the girl. Like straight up. They lasted less than a year. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony, and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us, the attendees, and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over. Sigh. My wife is an event planner with a particular talent for higher-end weddings. I'm talking about $150,000 and up for the reception. Venue, catering, decor, music. Alone. The best I've heard from her is the following. Bride and her mother were discussing terms of the pre-nuptial agreement on the day of the wedding while doing hair and makeup. Something about a 1-year clause after which the terms eased and the bride could exit the marriage with a nice payout. So I guess the marriage lasted at least a year? When he smashed the cake in her face and hair, then went off drinking with his buddies. In 12 weeks, she filed. Good thing I didn't buy an expensive gift. After the wedding, my friend's new wife, who was fairly quiet in public, was screaming at my friend's family, telling them it was the last time they would be seeing them and how terrible they were. It was hard to watch. 2 years later, my friend walked in on her and a dude. That was that. When we had to pay $35 for the paperwork to be filed. Courthouse wedding. And he spent the rest of the day complaining about the waste of money. They got secretly married at the local town hall out of spite to the girl's father, who did not agree with the relationship. This happened right out of high school, and they divorced during my sophomore year at college. When the groom started off his speech by saying, "We all know I didn't want to get married, but we're here for bride and child we had together. 1 year. 3 months later they were finished. My husband was the best man at a wedding. The bride was a nightmare, not just during the wedding, but in general everyday life. All of the friends hated her, and she had no friends of her own. We knew it was doomed when, during the portraits, the bride was making everyone miserable as can be. The groom said, exact words, 'I'll just send her to therapy, and if that doesn't work, we can just get divorced.' Edit. For emphasis. Not at the wedding itself, but when my spouse and I went to pick up our marriage license, we encountered a young man shouting at his fiancée outside the building because she had failed to remind him to bring the right IDs. We were like, big yikes. I hope they're doing okay." His third wedding. Same venue and same after ceremony driving away vehicle as the first two. The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entering into a betting pool of how long the marriage would last. At the wedding reception, IIRC the best man won. Price is Right rules. At 14 months. I'm a wedding photographer and I have a few of these. When a very young, not dating long couple say things like the partner is perfect, and we never fight. When there's name calling, I particularly cringed at. It's because we so get each other and are so comfortable that he can call me Dumb Salute as a nickname. They didn't last the year. One where the wedding was all about the groom promoting his band. He even sang his bride a song. That was literally just him showing off his vocal range with some classic piece. She stood up and joined him on stage halfway through and he looked annoyed that he had to share the limelight. They lasted about 2 years. He was sleeping with the other vocalist in the band. Worked as a limo driver, ostensibly. I was doing a practice run. Bride's family and groom then said, "Surprise! We are doing the wedding today." Bride was stunned and silent the whole time. It was the one time when I was going to break the prime directive. Edit. Grammar. Edit 2. Thanks for the award, kind stranger. Portuguese wedding. Fist fight broke out at the head table during the reception. Between two groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. Groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. Surprised it took that long. Midnight buffet was amazing though. The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. Prior to my wedding, I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. "What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarrassing me." We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. At my wedding, she paused for a long second before saying yes. The woman marrying us was like, oh, she's thinking about it. She laughed it off and said yes. We lasted 3, almost 4 years married. The part of the vows where you pledge monogamy? The audience laughed. When the bride tried to playfully feed the groom some cake, pulling it back once it got close to his mouth. The third time she did this, he slapped it out of her hand and stormed off. In the ensuing awkward silence and wide-eyed staring, we all knew it wouldn't last. Surprisingly, they were together for nearly 2 years before the bride eloped away with her step-brother. No one saw that coming. Just before the wedding started, my mother turned to me and said, "You are making the biggest mistake of your life. If we get in the car and leave now, I will never say another word." She was right. When they disappeared for half an hour during the reception, they were both saving themselves for marriage and were desperate to bone down, which is a fine thing to want. But it turns out that was more or less the main reason they got married. They made it almost a year. The bride told her bridesmaids that she didn't actually want to get married. Multiple times. No one told the groom until after the divorce. When he raised his eyebrows and gave her a knowing look during the "for richer or for poorer" portion of their vows. For context, he was a newly drafted pro athlete and she was a big fan of his signing bonus. I worked at a nice restaurant in Nola. Bride is lovely, she is excited and very receptive to our suggestions on things in their budget. Groom is an insufferable know-it-all. He's bargain hunting. "Crab cakes don't cost that much, what if I buy them and you serve them?" On their big day, I am holding the door as they walk out the first time as husband and wife. W. We got married, I am so happy. H. Not really, we gotta fill out paperwork and file it with the state. I've seen 3-week-old balloons less deflated than that poor woman. I hope she got out of there. I was at the wedding of one of my mom's oldest friends and she clearly had more fun dancing with the best man after the wedding. Long story short, they dated for a while after the divorce. The groom took the stupid cake thing to an extreme. The bride had given him his bite and mushed a little on his chin or nose. He then took a piece and mashed it into her face so hard that I was expecting her to end up with a bloody nose. Cake and frosting got up her nose, in her eyes, down the front of her dress, etc. The bride had to go get cleaned up, had her makeup redone, and was ugly, crying within an hour of saying, "I do." He didn't give a frock. They were both so drunk they were slurring during the vow exchange. A month before the wedding, the couple made an appointment with me, the church music director, organist, to plan music for the ceremony. Each made suggestions on music he or she would like. But no matter how many pieces were considered and demonstrated, they couldn't agree on anything, and would get into heated arguments over processionals, recessionals, vocal solos, and prelude music, even though they were all good possibilities. The bride and groom simply seemed indifferent to one another's wishes and needs. In the end, based on what I heard each of them most wanting, I offered compromises in an effort to bring about peace, selections which they finally agreed to. They were engaged, but showed no signs of being in love. YTF am I reading this the morning of my wedding? Edit for anyone interested. It went great. Other than me losing my ring during pictures. Thank you all for the well wishes, it means a lot to us both. Lots of love for everyone. The groom showed up drunk after golfing with buddies all day. The bride in her vows said, for richer. Left out the poorer. Former wedding DJ here, I've seen some sit. Top 3. 3. Huge brawl on the dance floor between the entire bridal party. Bride knocked her new hubby the frock out. 2. Groom was going after the garter, blindfolded. Picked the wrong girl. Maid of honor. Should have known it wasn't his bride when the garter wasn't there. Had his head up her dress for way too long. 1. Bride disappears right after dinner for about an hour. After she returned, groom's father comes up and asks for the mic. Proceeds to announce to the entire place that his son's new bride was just upstairs stupping her ex-boyfriend, and that the marriage is over. Crazy times, man. The bride had a bruised eye covered by makeup. Also, it was visible that walking was hurting her. I might think it was because the corset was pushing on broken ribs. Took her 3 years to run away. My own wedding. We promised none of that immature smash cake and face BS. Well, she went for it. I was taken completely by surprise. Dodged, and slapped the cake out of her hand in the manner of someone disarming an attacker. Awkward silence. Edit. For all those that are asking, divorced in 1 year 10 months. Well, that is when I left. Divorce took a year longer. When my sister married her first husband, she mouthed to my father walking her down the aisle, I can make this work, right? They were divorced 6 months later. My whole family knew it wasn't a good idea since the original engagement a year prior. When the maid of honor professed her love for my brother during her toast at my brother's wedding, and her husband walked up to the head table, picked her up and carried her away before she could embarrass him further. They lasted about 3 months after that. My brother and his wife, on the other hand, are still happily married 20 years later. Had an old boss who was divorced. He told me once, I should have known it wasn't going to last, when the only happy moment I had on my wedding day was when I snuck out to smoke weed with my buddies in the parking lot. When my cousin and her husband said, I semi-promise, in their vows, as in, I semi-promise to love and honor, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea WTF it was supposed to mean, but I guess it sounds better than, I'll try, but if it's too hard, frock it, I'm out. Weird twist. They've been married 30+ years now. I went to a wedding held at my town's hunting lodge, tons of stuffed animals on the walls and no AC in July. Bride was 7 months pregnant and smoking outside in between the wedding and the after party, and the new husband was totally sit-faced by the second song, which was Rape Me by Nirvana as requested by the bride's 16-year-old daughter. The whole thing was one giant trashy sit show, haha. They divorced a year later. He got so frocked up at the reception he had a fist fight with her cousin in the toilets over coke. He told all the other cousins to frock off. He hit on my aunt. He told my cousin's child to come back to him when she was 15/16. And he forgot to bring his child to the hotel. I was the best man at a wedding a few years back. At the rehearsal dinner, his future in-laws were treating him like crap. They were bossing him around, making him do crap, and talking down to him. They didn't let him hang out with his groomsmen afterwards while the bride went out and got drunk. They are now divorced. Edit to add a little detail. Yes, he should have stood up for himself. His ex's parents were making him do crap for the wedding the next day, and he was too nice to say no. For you youngsters out there, this is cliché, but you really do marry the family and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, a lot of the times. High school friend of mine married a 26-year-old Marine who she had been dating for a year. Any situation where a 25-plus-year-old person is waiting on someone to turn 18 to get married is not going to end well, emo. Groom slept with another groomsman the night before he married his wife. Wanted to go to a gay bar at the bachelor party. Came out 2 years into the marriage. Denial ain't just a river in Egypt. My mum forgot to take off her ex-husband's wedding ring. During the cake ceremony, the bride rather forcefully shoved a piece of cake into the groom's face. It seemed to be done with a little too much anger and not enough good humor. You could tell the groom was not happy. They were divorced a year later. My wife and I were both in the wedding party for a friend of mine. Found out from her the bride was talking to guys on a dating app while she was getting ready the morning of the wedding. Also during the ceremony, more than one family member could be heard saying it won't last and what a mistake it was. The morning after the wedding at campfire coffee, the new bride turned to the groom, asked, "Are you going to wear your ring every day because it kinda makes you look like a FA***OT? Those of us their side glanced and took deep sips of coffee. I think it lasted 4 to 6 months. At my aunt's wedding, pastor, repeat after me, for richer and for poorer. The bride, for richer and for richer. Yay, they didn't last long. The bride was caught being tag-teamed like 2 hours after the ceremony. The writing was already on the wall. My wife's cousin said, "I hate his frocking family, they're complete trash," and also said something to my wife about 6 being such an unsatisfying chore. Poor groom died in a motorcycle accident a few years later as they were planning their divorce, and she's been with a different dude every month since. The couple got married 2 months out of high school after dating for only a year. The whole wedding was the moment. Not at the wedding, but how the couple met. My 40-year-old cousin met his 18-year-old wife when she was dating his 17-year-old nephew. They started an affair. She left the nephew and married the uncle. They got divorced 2 months later when she had an affair with a third guy. When they were doing the vows and the priest got to the "for richer or poorer" part and she said, "for richer or richer and maybe for poorer," the officiant was not pleased. I think they made it a year. The maid of honor's speech included, "I remember when she called and said, 'I'm getting married,' and I had to reply, 'To who?'" Single quote. One of my childhood friends had broken up with then reconciled with his girlfriend and they decided to get married last year. His parents were against it and tried to interfere in the ceremony only for the girl's parents to actively shut them out of the service. My friend's parents cut ties with him shortly after. They are getting divorced under a year later. Quickie green card wedding. Bride told the justice of the peace the wrong pronunciation of her husband's last name, and an entirely wrong middle name. Luckily, the justice took the fall for the mistake and didn't call out the bride for literally not knowing the name of the person she was marrying. But yeah, that wasn't a great start to their very short marriage. I saw a bride's father say this during his wedding speech to his daughter. "I got this one, next one's on you." The new husband grabbed my ass. Wife was apparently also cheating. Divorced a few months lately. They later cheated on their new partners with each other. I used to work for an event center that hosted a lot of weddings pre-COVID. After one ceremony I saw the groom slap the butt of one of the bridesmaids in the hallway. She laughed and with a big smile said, "Oh Jeremy, you'll never change." Edit. Thank you so much to the kind people who gave me my first Reddit awards. Years ago I got a wedding invitation that said to please cover your plate by giving at least $200 as a wedding gift. We didn't go. But that couple was divorced in 2 years. The groom showed up to his own reception wearing a t-shirt with restroom sign style stick figures depicting a bride and groom captioned "Game Over." When the groom said, "I will," when asked if he'd take the bride said, "I do." It should be noted the groom was on his third wife. The bride was the other woman in his last marriage. Surprisingly, infidelity is not what caused the divorce. It was infertility. Met at the groom's house on our way to the bachelor party. We gathered around for a shot and his toast, verbatim, was, "To my future ex-wife." We all looked at each other awkwardly for a moment but ultimately didn't think much of it and had a great night. Turned out he was already cheating on her. Ended up having a kid with the other woman. And get divorced when she found out. He is obviously no longer a friend. Well, here it goes. My cousin got married probably a decade ago and during the wedding it came out that groom was not the best to my cousin while dating. The bride's brother did not take this well and during the after party a shouting match became a brawl between the two families. Next thing you know the police show up and literally pepper spray everyone, including my grandma, kids and anyone near the area. I don't remember if anyone got arrested but the story got on CBS The Early Show for the international news. Lol, they did not last long to say the least. Former event staff here. When the bride mentioned, "I'll be happy if this lasts 5 years," before the ceremony. When another bride appeared to be really into the guy, and he barely reciprocated or even smiled the whole time. Rumor was he was only doing it because they had a baby together. My brother proposed with an onion ring wrapped in tinfoil. I very nearly gave them lotto tickets as a wedding present, figuring they would have better odds on winning the lotto than staying together. 3 kids and 8 separations later. When they moved to Texas, I was sure they'd be on cops one day. Sweet pea. The police are here again. Nah. They said they want you this time. Not 1. Not 2. Not 3 but 5 of her exes were in the attendance. 3 of them had no date. I understand being in good terms but Jesus, do you really invite all of them at your wedding? Funnily enough it lasted 5 months. Sadly, the groom asked me, his best man, to give him one last blow job before the wedding for old time's sake. Lesbian couple married at a church. Frockhead dad had to be locked out for threatening the life of his daughter's fiancé. 8 months later Frockhead dad murdered daughter's fiancé. I knew that sick Frock was going to try and break them apart. Cousin's wedding when her mother and the groom's mother went outside to argue about how the bride's side was not at their assigned seats. They took over the groom's side. Marriage lasted less than 6 months. The after-wedding dinner. My aunt's husband only referred to her as breach. I used to work at a pretty city privately owned exotic animal facility. Think like Joe Exotic but less meth. People often booked kids' birthday parties, etc. One time, we hosted a wedding reception. The theme was hot fucking pink, so the clowns we normally hire were better dressed than them. The women looked like she wanted to cry the entire time. Not happy tears LMAO. I felt bad for her. I feel like the groom just wanted to book the cheapest venue with a C and they happened to like animals. If you like animals, you wouldn't support where I worked. Edited for typos SMH. The groom left for 2 hours in the middle of the reception to run a live fantasy football draft. They're divorced now. My wife and I went to a cousin's wedding. Both of them were adults still living at home. Both had low-paying jobs and had never been married. They were both 30 plus. When we got there, everyone was acting kind of weird during the ceremony and reception. We come to find out neither family wanted them getting married. The family priest did not want to do the services. It goes on and on. Weirdest thing ever. But they were oblivious to it all. It was like they were in a bubble. Their marriage has been a tremendous success. They lifted each other up, just goes to show. There is a lid for every teapot. My foster parents got married, but on the honeymoon the bride moaned another man's name. It was his friend Kenneth, who was X2 older than her. After he died I had to switch families, but I heard she's dating him now. Not technically at the wedding, but on the way back, my ex-wife said she wished we hadn't got married. That was my first clue, huh? Went as a +1 to an engagement party. I asked the lucky couple when they were planning to get married. They looked at me like I was insane and told me they weren't planning to get married, they were just getting engaged. Some confusion there. 2 months later I went as a +1 to the girl's next engagement. I didn't bother to ask if they were getting married. My own wedding. 1. Groom got blind drunk the night before and still looked drunk as I walked down the aisle. 2. Groom forgot wedding license as was still pissed. 3. Groom didn't say I looked nice in any way. 4. Groom became blind drunk by the reception dinner. Knife to cut cake was almost planted in him. 5. Had to support said groom on first dance as he was plastered. 6. Took groom to bridal suite after he had an argument with a harmless parked car who clearly looked at him the wrong way. We lasted 8 years. Most plagued with alcohol. Lesson: if it looks like a drunk, walks like a drunk, swears like a drunk, then it probably is a drunk. The end. Felt good writing that. Wedding party once. Bride spent the entire night before the wedding waking us up to tell us she didn't want to marry the groom. We told her not to. She did. They're divorced. Lasted longer than we predicted though. These were just bad omens rather than red flags. Someone died at my cousin's wedding reception. Had a heart attack while dancing. My uncle gave the ol'. Joe would have wanted us to go on. Type announcements. The couple then went on their honeymoon to somewhere in Southeast Asia and the country had a coup, so they had to flee across the border. They lasted about 14 months. Well, making his speech, the best man said, "We all know how's easy. Bride's name is, I can name at least 7 guys here she has frocked. But to be fair, it's not like you are much better. Lest we forget you frocked my wife a few weeks ago."